This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd here again, Dave, with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Got another great guest for you. Had a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today. He's a value add specialist. He's done some redevelopment, other asset classes as well. So please help me welcome my guest, Frank Rizzo. Frank, thanks for coming on, man.
Ferd, thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm really glad to be part of your program.
Yeah, well, likewise. Glad to have you. And I know you got a lot of stuff cooking, so maybe tell us a little bit more about your background if everybody doesn't know you, and we can go from there.
Sure. My partner and I formed Stone Capital about 10 years ago, where we entered the space. Since then, we've been in and out, probably about 23 communities, mainly in the Sun Belt. Encompassing anywhere from North Carolina straight down, running the whole gamut, all the way to Georgia, Alabama. We focus on some deep value add opportunities. Like you mentioned, we tend to look at communities that, say, other operators might shy away from. Our specialty has been working on those situations, whether it's infill, whether it's infrastructure improvements, or whether it's just maximizing the space in a better way. We've kind of, once we got into this space, Ferd, it's been, and because you're focused in it, it becomes all encompassing. So, we built out an organization that just focuses on, vertically integrated, owning, operating our communities from the from beginning to end cycle.
Yeah, good stuff. So yeah, value added. Well, I've done a lot of value add as well. So I'm curious on yours. Do you want all your parks to be value add? And then how do you balance those? Because for me, for example, I've got two parks that are value add, and I have a couple right now that are 2.5 hours apart. So relatively same location, as far as if I find a used home halfway in the middle. So I got to decide which park am I going to send it to? So I'm curious, and then also I've had other parks that have, come to my attention or, and almost fall in my lap. And I've been like, you know what? I don't need another value add right now in that location. So I personally try to mix in a couple, stabilized parks. Obviously the stabilized parks are competitive, harder to find, harder to buy, especially if you start getting scale. So if you try to buy off market where a lot of the value is, you end up finding a lot of deals that are 20 and 30% occupancy. So I'm curious how you look at those. And is two vacant, would you take something that's 5% occupied, or is value add of you maybe 30, 40, 50% range?
I think that's a great question, right? And in total, I think you got to look at the market, right? And what that absorption rate would be and where your competition is. So if you're going to buy something that's a huge infill project, but the absorption rate in that community is going to take you're only going to be able to infill so much during the course of a year. If it doesn't fit, where in 24 months we can stabilize it and get it to the underwriting where we expect it, then it's something that you got to adjust the price, right? Because that's the only way you could really work on it. So there is a challenge to that, and part of the science is, do you have a team in place? And we've been able to grow out of geographic hubs. And when we've got our team on the ground that's running and has been effective in that ground, and we know that we have good managers and our crew there kind of knows our system, then we feel really confident of being able to grow and scale inside of that market. But as we enter into a new market, you're correct, Ferd. You're not going to want to take on a huge project in a new market where you don't have a team in place. So we're very conscious of, because we are doing the work in-house, where our team is, what that work schedule is like, where we might be able to relocate people to get on site, kind of balance that logistically with the asset, the acquisitions team, to make sure that we're not just buying to buy, but we're buying and able to execute at the same time.
No, I think that's prudent. One thing that we've had to look at over the years, in particular, I got an acquisitions analyst, they'll underwrite certain level of infill. They may say, hey, it's 50 out of 100. We've got, obviously 50 to go. Hey, we can infill one a month. That's just over 4 years. And then I'll say, in a vacuum, I think that might make sense. We can infill one a month. I said, but who's going to do the actual infill? Who's going to do the permits? Who's going to do the site prep, the finding the homes? Who's going to sell the homes? And they're like, oh, well, we can have this person work on that. Like, okay, well, this person is already doing a very similar project 2.5 hours away. So are you going to infill one a month at Park A and Park B? Because in a vacuum, that makes sense. But together, that smaller unit of people is going to have to do 2 a month. And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And then if you find a home, where's it going to go? Park A or Park B? Especially if the parks do not support new homes. A lot of value add parks, that's part of the challenge too, is the economic support of new homes. It's easy to buy new homes. It's just, can you sell them?
You know what? You took the words out of my mouth, because and we've seen, and I know you've seen, a lot of operators or syndicators come in, and not every market is a new home market. And so we're in one market where, one operator came in and they brought in 90 new homes in a park that they bought. They bought a huge park there, and they sat for, because there was too much supply in that market for new homes. And instead of selling them, they had to rent them. And one thing that you'll find is, if you're going to bring in a new home, and I'm sure you've seen this, nobody wants to buy a new home that's 2 years old, right? They want a new home. That's a new home. If that new home sits for a second, then they want the new model, right? They want or you have to discount the home substantially. So it took them a while to work through that inventory, which just kind of depressed the market in that area. But it's a great resale market, and you could sell homes all day long between 20 and 30,000. You just couldn't hit that 60 to 70,000, 90 homes in 12 months. Like, there was just not the absorption rate to do that. So I think that's something that you have to be conscious of. And I know you operate in different markets. Probably something you see quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I've seen that for sure. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, one thing we've got in central Missouri, I have 3 parks that are, 2 of them are a minute, 2 minutes apart. The third one's like 45 minutes away. So if we find a used home halfway in between, I know what I can sell the home for in each of the 3 parks. And 2 of them, again, they're literally 1 mile apart. So it's the exact same trade area, but one of the parks is like, okay. One of them's pretty nice. So I know if I get a 1995 3.2 1680 champion, and the park that's just okay, I can probably sell that for like 28,000. The park a mile away, I can sell for 38,000. The park that's 45 minutes away in a town of 15,000, that's 12 miles off the interstate, I can sell it for probably 20 or less. So in the third park, I have to sell homes at a loss. So what I've had to learn is, which we brought in a few nicer homes there to make the park look better, but I can see a picture of the home and I can tell you which park it's going to. Mm-hmm. And so manager will be like, hey, we found a good lead. It's a good buy. This home for 10,000. Like, okay, regardless of what you're buying it for, I want to know what I can sell it for. And if it's a 1985 metal, I'm like, that's not going to the really nice park. But if it's a vinyl shingle 2004, that's not going to the third park, and it's only going to the middle quality park if I have a perimeter lot that I want some eye candy on. So I'll almost have a loss leader to make the park look better. And we even demoed one home and put a nice looking house there, because you pull in, it's your first impression. But you really got to know at as much of a micro level as possible what you can sell the homes for. And I tell managers regularly, I'm not as directly involved today, but they'll say, well, what do we price the home at? And I say, the answer to every legal question is the same here. The answer is, it depends. How do you value the home? Well, which park is it in? Which lot is it in? What are the last ones you sold? What is the competitors selling for? What's the quality of the customer? Which banks are available? Some of our parks, in particular in certain states, some of the lenders were not available. Lenders have different programs. Some lenders have minimums, some have age minimums and maximums. So you got to look at a number of variables, including what do you have in inventory? Because I know when I first did a park myself, I bought 6 homes of 6 different styles from 6 different manufacturers because I wanted to see what sold. Well, the 1466 True Elation did not sell. The True Victory Plus 1676 sold really well. The Clayton Independent 1676 sold really well. I had a Clayton Pulse, I had a Skyline, I had a Commonwealth, and I realized the new 14 wide didn't sell because it was new, so it was quasi expensive, but it was only 14. The used 16s wide sold better, so I then had to price accordingly. So then what I did was that would impact even which homes I would let myself rent versus sell. So I'm like, I'm not going to let you rent. I told my manager, like, I'm not going to let you rent a double because you can sell a double. I'll let you rent the 1460 or 1466. So I think knowing that market on the sales side is part of the analysis for the infill and then the value add, I think.
Do you look at, we look at on a quarterly basis in the markets we're in, where the rents in those markets are trending, so we can make sure that, I tell everybody here on the team, I mean, this is a business of nickels and dimes, and you got to look at where your comparison is. And we look at, it's a total price point, right? So if someone's buying a home from you, they're including that lot rent. You have to be conscious of where that total cost to the consumer is, right? Where your resident's going to price out at, because if you're over a certain number, they're going to trend somewhere else, right? So you have to be the affordable option, I believe, in the markets that you're serving, because that's going to be one of your key components of being able to be fluid in this market and keeping that occupancy high.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, for us on the value add parks, typically they've been so mismanaged for years that the rents are so stupid cheap that we're not even pushing the rents near where they can be, because we're trying to get the infill. So if I've got rents that are at $220 and home rents are $1,100 for a 3-bedroom apartment, I got a lot of margin there. I can bring a mobile home in and rent it for $700, $750 all day. Could I get it $950? Maybe, but I'm trying to get the absorption, so I'm keeping it a little artificially light. I'll get rents up later in life. Now, some of my parks that are stable and some of my parks that are in really nice markets, everybody else's rents have gone through the roof so much that we've been able to, be a little bit more aggressive on rents, and it's still a good value proposition for the customer. And I'm in the Midwest, so I don't see the same level of swings that maybe coastal stuff does, or I don't know, but the Sun Belt, I think you guys had a lot of strong rent growth the last 3 to 5 years. So I think some of those markets have declining rents now. We really haven't experienced, we've never decreased our rent. I've got one park where it's a really rough and tumble park in a blue collar town where we have not increased rent. We just, hey, fill it back up, keep the rent the same. And part of it's because for whatever reason in this park, when we bought it, it was $400 a site. And right across the street is a really nice park. Right across the street's an apartment, but immediately adjacent to it is a really nice park with a playground and all kinds of stuff that we just didn't have room for in ours. And it was owned by, at the time, Strive, and they were $350. Ooh. So I was like, how can I'm already $50 a month above the best park within 100 miles. So I don't want to raise rent as I'm trying to infill. So that park I've kept literally, I think today we're at $410 and it's been 4 years. So we moved it $5 and then we missed a year. We used to be like, hey, $5 and do every year, but then we paused a year. And we had a lot of turnover there as well. But
I think, one of the things we're very conscious of, if we acquire a community, and a lot of times, mom and pop might have the rents so far below, but the standards are so far below, right? Whether it's, not screening your next door neighbor, whether it's infrastructure, roads, a lack of services. As you put those services on, I know everyone likes to rush to get to market. I think with the legacy residents, you have to give them some time to adjust. We never look to see a payment shock with somebody. And I think that's one of the touches that you have to have in this space that you might not have in other markets or other spaces or garden style apartments where, all right, let's just, move rents to market. Here, we understand the legacy resident might have adjusted to a lower payment, but it's on the infill where we want to get closer to market, right? Or set market, because they'll see the community as it is now, not as it was 12 months ago. So I think that's where you have to blend that into your underwriting and set that expectation that if I have legacy residents that are just that they're going to take some time before I can get them to that, $400 a month lot rent, because they were sitting at 220 for so long. We don't want to just, we don't want to go, day one, and get you to where we know market is, right? We want to give you some time to absorb. We want to add some value to your community. We want you to see that value, whether it's we're going in there and, improving, your skirting, your roof, your exterior on us. I think once you do that, people kind of understand that, hey, you did something for me. I'm willing to kind of give a little something back in terms of lot rent increase to you.
No, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of strategic reasons as well to do that, right? I mean, if you take the rents from 200 to 400, you're more likely to be on Channel 9. You're more likely to have rent control come to your town. You're more likely to make people be homeless, and that's not going to make you feel good. You're more likely to get somebody throw a rock at your truck when you drive through.
I haven't had that happen to me yet, though.
Yeah, good for you. I haven't actually had it happen either, but I've had people be pissed before a rent increase. So we've kind of toyed, and I know there's one big operator in particular that has been on the show. He made a comment that if they're going to do a bunch of different improvements, they may say year one, we're fixing the roads, $50 increase. Year two, we're adding a playground, $50 increase. Year three, we're going to add, new berms and flowers and bushes everywhere. But then they kind of ran into what happens in year four? There's nothing left. Mm-hmm. So I've tried that approach a little, and I'm curious your opinion here in a minute, but on that, but what I've kind of preferred to do is I just go gangbusters out of the gate. But instead of taking the rent up $100, I'll still do $30 or $40. But then next year I'll say, as you will recall, we did ABC improvements rather than increase the revenue by another 30 or $40 at the same time. We've spread it out over several years. And then I kind of tell them look, I increased it 35 last year. I'm going to do 30 this year. And hey, foreshadowing, it's going to be another 30 next year. But you can see, and I'll also not even reference the dollar amount. As you can tell, in the first month of ownership, we spent $150,000. Clearly, the $30 rent increase for 40 of you didn't cover that. And so I've kind of communicated it, and that's worked pretty well. But when I've owned the parks, some of these parks I've owned for 5 years, if the fifth year increase, they're kind of like,
what did you do?
It's going to go on forever, So how do you approach that when you're doing a value add? Because obviously, if you put all the stuff in there right away, it makes it easier to sell houses when you got 5 amenities instead of 2 amenities, for example.
So we'll go in look, each community is a little different, but mostly the same. I mean, we're doing the cleanup. We're doing the major site work that has to be done, whether it's debris removal, whether it's cleanup of the community, whether it's road work or infrastructure work, that has to be done step one, right? So we get that done. At that point, after we've done that, if there's park-owned homes, and usually, this becomes a mixed bag. There's no one way of everything. We want to set a standard. So we get the homes that we're responsible for, increase that standard to the exterior of those homes the way we want everybody else to. And we offer an opportunity for everybody else we'll help them get it along on exterior work, whether it's skirting you need done, we'll cool seal your roof, we'll do some exterior work to make your home standard, which is going to be your responsibility after we do it. At that point, as we start to phase in increases, well, you've already gotten your roads repaired, we've already reskirted your home. If we told you that you had to reskirt your home, it was going to cost you $2,500. If we did it for you, now you have skirting. If I ask you to pay $50 more, you're still making out on the deal. For us, we get a home that we don't own that looks a lot nicer, makes it easier for us to infill the rest of it, because no one wants to buy a new home where maybe their neighbor home is a little unkept, right? Right. We've already underwrote that cost on initial acquisition. So we know going in, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on the homes we don't own, right? To make sure that their lots are up to standard. But this to me is a win-win-win situation. Resident gets a win because their home is going to be improved, no cost to them. Community gets a win because it's going to look better and it's going to make it easier for us to sell the new homes that we want to bring in. And additionally, we're going to increase the cash flow and the value of the park, because now we'll be able to step in and increase, and people can understand because they've actually gotten something back for that money. So, we take that approach. So we have to step in that raise, and we understand that we're probably anywhere, depending on the community and the work, 6 to 12 months out before we're going to initiate our first increase after we acquire a park.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I like to, if I'm going to do the value add, especially big infrastructure stuff that's visible like roads, I like to do it right away and before we send a rent increase.
Yes,
Because it makes it so much easier. I mean, in my opinion, fixing the roads is probably the most well received of any value add improvement. I'm curious which, maybe two or three, and I'll give you a few more of mine. Two or three things that you feel like people appreciate, and then two or three things that you're kind of disappointed that they don't appreciate more, and that you think they should, as far as improvements to the community.
I've said this, after buying the park, the most exciting day is watching the roads get done. Like everybody watches,
right?
We see it, like, and everybody sees that's happening, and no one gets. I guess you do this long enough, anything will happen. I've had one person in one park, when we said we were doing the roads and we were just talking with him, looked at me and says, "Well, I guess that means the lot rent is going to increase," and like he was mad about it. Like,
yeah. I've had that happen too. We sent a survey to one park. What amenities do you want? We had like 10 amenities to choose from. So everybody picked your top 3, and everybody selected. The roads were horrible. We were going to do the roads anyway, but we made it seem like we gave you what you wanted, right? Everybody selected the roads. We had like 50% participation. So everybody that responded, they selected the roads, except one person. It was like rated on 1 to 5. One person put no on the roads because I know that it's going to mean my rent's going way up. He's like, he must have lived up front because he'd have to drive over all the potholes.
But the thing about it is, think about how much damage it does to their cars in other ways, and you're actually saving money down the road. So that to me is the most. I love being down there for that day. It's the most exciting day. The tree work, which I happen to love, when that you come into a community that's just overgrown and has debris and has homes in there that have just been left to be overgrown, removing that, clearing back the tree, it's almost like giving like when you get a nice haircut and you look back, and you could actually see the beauty of the park through the mess of the overhang. And I happen to love that. I think it gives the community a completely different look and feel. So I happen to think that that's another big improvement that and it doesn't have to cost a lot to do it, but it definitely improves the look and the feel of any community. And I guess one thing that you do that doesn't get as well received or doesn't get as noticed is when you do like the necessary infrastructure improvements and upgrades. And listen, from a resident perspective, that's what should be done, right? But a lot of times you go into these communities that have, and when we first bought parks, we would only look at city water, city sewer. Now we have well and septic, and we've gone in there and we've replaced water lines, and whether changing pumps, and sometimes a lot of preventatively, like we just know, like, hey, this is the time. Let's do it now. Let's get it out of the way. And obviously for the resident, they don't realize or recognize that impact, but it's very costly to do. So you want to run new lines in a community and you're doing it for them. And we don't expect them to realize it, but we do, when you do that, it is a very, and I'm sure you've had to change some water lines. It can be a very costly endeavor. But it's necessary, and I think it's an improvement that is unseen, unrecognized, but so needed.
Yeah, good points there. So I've one thing that interesting on the tree work. So I've only had a couple parks. I'm trying to think of how many. At least I guess three parks where we had to really remove the canopy of the tree line that was like hanging over the trucks and everything. So when we've done that tree work, it's been appreciated, and it makes a big difference. So that's why, just like the roads are easy. Everybody sees it. It's good value for everybody. The tree work that removes canopy has been well received. The other tree work, I feel like, is the thing that frustrates me the most, because we'll spend a lot of money. We had, I think we cut down like 60 trees in this one park, dead trees in this one park we renovated last year. And it was a game changer to me. All these dead trees, it looked like an abandoned neighborhood. They're going to fall on your house. there's death and desolation. We took them all down and we're like, what do you guys think? And they're like, I mean, whatever, it's just a tree. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is a whole different world. So that one to me, they've been less appreciative of. I feel like the rules enforcement is a mixed bag. You know, we all know why, right? If you clean up the junk, it's like if you're the junkie guy, you don't like the new rules. If you're across the street from the junkie guy, you love the new rules. So that's been kind of a mixed bag. I feel like playgrounds are pretty well received. We've done some dog parks, and I don't feel like they're not super expensive. They're not super fancy, but I feel like people don't appreciate them that much and don't use them as much as I would have thought. Covered picnic areas seem to be popular. We've never done any pools or anything like that, but we get requests for things like we want a pool. Soccer goal is really easy. You got to have the land obviously available, but soccer goal is really easy, and that's been pretty popular. That's a good bang for a buck if you've got the land. But the tree work is one that really I'm kind of frustrated in, and then speed bumps. I love speed bumps because they work. They slow you down.
Yes.
Our residents hate speed bumps.
They want to go fast.
Yeah, they want to go fast.
And the one thing you got to remember, right, as you do the speed bumps, and I'm sure the balusters around the speed bumps become equally as important, because as soon as you put the speed bumps on, they're always trying to figure out a way around the speed bumps.
Right.
You have to figure out those other paths, because if you don't, that's always my, if I have a concern about any community, it's like, all right, where would someone might go to divert? It might drive fast, and that might become an issue. So that's always, concern as we're laying things out and we're looking at, where that might be an issue and how that might impact the resident. Something else, and it sounds so simple. But lighting, and a lot of times we've gone into communities and we put in some street lights or additional lights. And a lot of times it doesn't even, you can get the power company to put up the pole. They just want a contract. And so by doing that, that's super helpful. And having a lighted community sometimes is a huge value add over the community that doesn't have it, right? People just like that fact that, hey, I got a street light down there. I'm not coming down into darkness. And that's something that becomes a big win for people.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the lighting, but I did definitely agree. And I had one value add park that we had filled a ton of houses that have an entire street that was empty, and the light would be on one end, and then the next house was say 10 down. Well, then it was fine. Well, then I filled in the vacant lots, and it made it darker down the way because there was no longer this direct path from the light. It was blocked. So then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, the new houses look good, but now I can barely walk to my car at night because it's so dark. So then I had to add lighting because I had exacerbated the issue. So it's interesting. Well, Frank, tell me about this. We were talking offline about the two parks you bought in the same town, and how you're shutting one down to work on the other. That's a great story. Maybe give some people some insights on that and how you've kind of changed that investment strategy.
So we were looking at one park in Laurinburg, North Carolina, and the first park we were looking at, mom and pop ownership. There's 134 lots, and as we were talking with the owner and trying to get sense of who they are, why they're selling, what's going on, what was your vision for the park, we found that they owned the only other park in town, right? So the city had two active mobile home parks. They owned both of them. One of them was 40 units. One of them was 134 lots, and both of them were half filled. So for us, as looking at this, one, I didn't want to fund my competitor, right? And buy their big park and give them an opportunity to fill up their small park. And then secondly, so it didn't make sense to have two half-filled parks. So we ended up extending the deal. We bought both communities from them. And, obviously, there's a premium on communities that are 100 lots or greater. That's just tough to find that type of scale in any community. So what we did was we took the 40-unit park with the 20 homes, and we moved all the homes to the larger community. So we owned some of the homes. Some homes we didn't, and the homes that we didn't, we offered to, at our cost, we would move the homes, we would set them up, skirt them, new decking, new roofing, do some exterior work and put people up in a hotel. So as we're going through the process, every resident that didn't own that owned their home, all but one of them agreed to go, right? The one that disagreed was the one that actually told us not to buy the park because there was some infrastructure sewer backups by her house, and she thought the park was a disaster. So she was the only one that we had, to extended negotiation with. But we ended up getting the 134 unit park right now is about 75% occupied. We're starting to bring in some new homes there. Park looks great. We did the roads. It's performed phenomenally well for us. And the other park, because it was on such a big spot, we got it approved to do a 120 unit garden style apartment complex. So that will be repositioned as a garden style apartment complex in a city that is just in a need for housing. I think they're expecting about a 6% population growth this year, and there hasn't been any, apartment developments or new developments there happening. So there's definitely an affordability issue and a housing shortage in Laurinburg. And so this is, we just felt this becomes a way to access to access that need as well. So we'll have the 120 unit garden style apartment complex, and then on probably about a mile and a half away, we have the mobile home park, which we're in the process of bringing in brand new, as you mentioned, Champion 16 by 76s, filling up the community. So we're pretty excited about that as well.
Yeah, that's great. To kind of, to kill two birds with one stone, right? I mean, I looked at doing that with another park. The city was trying to shut this park down, so I was negotiating with the seller, and the seller was super unreasonable. And I think I was trying to buy it for like $550. I owned a park down the street. Same thing. It was 30 here. I had 60 vacancy. I was like, of the 30, I was probably going to keep like 20 and not I don't want the other ones. And then the city was going to give me tax incentives to build a skyrise apartment or a hotel or something. And it was right on the interstate. And there was a new diverging diamond interchange coming in. So the traffic pattern was going to be really helpful. And I was trying to get it done. This guy wanted like 950. I was like, it's not worth 950. It's worth, 550. And he just ran it further into the ground, and the houses ended up demolishing and moving out and stuff, and eventually sold the city for $300,000. And the city just put it out of commission. But that was my goal, was to take 2 to 1. And then, the city was going to gladly give me tax incentives to make one of the trailer parks go away. I tried, but I didn't get it done like you were able to do.
Well, we were very fortunate. We had sellers that realized that they, one of the sellers he wanted out. He was done. He was ready to retire. And the other gentleman that actually works with us is one of our best on-site property managers now. He's working the site, and, he's participating with us and kind of executing on the vision that essentially he had in the first place anyway. Right. So, he's actually said, his 10-year plan, we were able to execute in 6 months just because we were able to invest some capital to get it there. And like I said, we happen to be very fortunate where we are in Laurinburg. We're right on that I-74 corridor, and there's such great things happening there, businesses relocating there. So, we looked at that as a great opportunity for us to kind of expand into kind of that growth phase as well with one of those sites.
Maybe before we go, any specific tips or tricks, if you will, on value add is, like lessons learned, like if there's something you've missed or something that maybe you didn't miss it, you're like, I'm really glad that I inspected X or I did Y. I mean, you just mentioned in Nuremberg there, new businesses coming to town. Like that's obviously really good if you can figure that out during your diligence, that it's a growing economy as opposed to declining economy. But as far as the other value add components, what comes to mind?
I would say, number one, don't underestimate your CapEx spend, right? And I think a big mistake people make, and I've seen other operators make or investors make in the space, they come in, they have a plan, which is kind of a scaled down plan, and expect to take the rest of the money out of, say, cash flow. It never works, right? If you don't come in day one with your true cost estimate of what it's going to take to make that community work and the improvements you want, you're going to find yourself never being able to get those improvements done and effectuated to make the change in the community you want to have. That's one. And something I would tell you to look for, and a mistake we made early on, I mean, have these trees between the homes, and it can look beautiful. And you think, what a great look and feel but you don't realize the damage that those trees can really cause underground, right? Whether it's the sewer lines, septic lines, to the homes themselves, So be very conscious of where those trees are, those tree roots, those tree limbs falling down during a storm. So I think you have to be conscious of that and don't get caught up in the beauty of it, but understand that there's a function to it as well, right? So, understand that pulling back those trees can be costly, can be dangerous, right? And it has to be done right. So those are kind of two tips I would give somebody in that space. Do not underestimate your CapEx starting day one, especially if you're doing value add, because it will come back to bite you if you don't have that money ready to be allocated. It'll delay your plan and maybe delay an exit down the road.
No, that's a good tip. And in addition to CapEx, I mean, you may lump these together, but park-owned home repairs, that's where for me, the CapEx I've really haven't missed that much because it's easier to get bids and you can kind of see a lot of it. But on the park-owned homes, like you really don't know how many things are busted in those homes until you're the landlord. You may walk through it. Okay, it looks like it's an okay house. And then the day you buy the park, you get a list of 15 items that are problematic. The closet you didn't look inside has got mold in it. And you got to rip out all the drywall and do all that. So I've had that burn me before where, okay, I'm budgeting like 10,000 on park on home repairs. And then it's like 50,000.
I think you got to know who you are, like what your model is. Are you going to repair every park on home? I mean, you could spend 50,000 in a home, or are you going to offset that home and let somebody else do that work? So you got to know that model and be comfortable and just stay with it, because you're right. You can get into that park-owned home and 10,000 can become 25,000 in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And you might not see a return on that dollar.
Right. But we had that one issue in one park in particular in a really good market. We had a park in St. Charles, Missouri, which is an affluent suburb of St. Louis. And there was a shop, and the shop already had a little office and it had half a bathroom, and it was a masonry building. So we thought, okay, let's just turn this masonry building into a single wide, and just, build it out. And I think we budgeted $20,000 to do it. And it already had, plumbing, electric, it already had good walls and roofs. But we can do that. Well, then when we went to do it, we had to get a permit because we were going to, for some reason we didn't get a permit. One of the things with the permit, the issue was we were going to put windows in. Right, because it was a masonry building. Well, if you're going to put a window in, it's got to be certain size, got to be certain style, and that required an additional permit. And then the only guys that were going to do the work were licensed contractors, and because it was an affluent market, they were renovating McMansions, they were building McMansions. So the low bid we got was like $78,000. I'm like, I'm not going to spend $78,000. I'd literally be better off just demoing it. Yeah. And bringing a single wide in brand new and to be way cheaper. But then I couldn't do that because it was grandfathered in on setbacks, was too close. So then I couldn't, if I knocked the building down, I couldn't put another home there. And this was $500 market. So I was like, I want to keep the occupancy. So what we ended up having to do on that is we just found a guy that he rented it was a Hispanic guy, had a construction crew. And he had guys come in seasonally. And then he had cars all over, and he'd have them all double and triple up on some of the homes. So we just said, why don't you put all your gear and all your stuff in here and just rent this from us as a shop? We'll charge you just lot rent. And then you got more room in your house where you don't have to give a bedroom full of leaf blowers and snow, and weed eaters and all that kind of stuff. And he went for it. And then, so we ended up turning it into basically a tenant owned home, and we didn't spend any money on it.
I think.
So it worked out really well, but I didn't, where I missed was I hadn't factored in having to get permits and having to, build this thing, to city code versus I'm like, okay, we're just going to build out the inside, put up some demising walls and, a kitchen, but it would end up being a lot bigger animal. So we ended up doing okay on it, but we ended up saving money. We ended up saving the 20,000 we budgeted, but, it definitely could have been a bad deal for us if we didn't find that guy.
It's a good thing you did that earlier rather than after you started the work. So that's key. So I guess the last thing you really need here too, and I guess everybody needs this before they do this, is you need a good attorney. Right? Without a good attorney, you'll catch yourself in a situation which maybe you spent 20,000 and not. So that's another good thing. You need a big good attorney before you get into any of these deals.
I'm going to write that one down. Make sure I don't miss that. Find a good attorney. All right, good. Just for the record, we don't pay Frank to say that. All right, Frank, before we jump in, anything else you want to share, or how can people find you?
If anybody wants to find me, you can find me on our website, which is stonecapinv.com. Additionally, you can find us on, we have a video series called Trailer Park Turnaround, where you can see some of our journeys on YouTube. So that's YouTube Trailer Park Turnaround, or you can catch us on the mhpexchange.com.
All right. Good stuff, Frank. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Ferd. Great talking with you as always.
You got it.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.